Hi, my name's Stuart and I'm the MD at ERGOS, and I'm joined today by Stuart from Surveil. Hi.
Hello there. Yeah, two stews in the room.
Exactly.
Well,
The world's not ready for that.
No.
Could you please tell me a little bit about Surveil and a little bit about what you do for Surveil?
Sure. So Surveil is a cloud analytics tool. Put simply, we have been around for approaching 10 years. We initially built Surveil for our own internal use. We were sort of cloud consultants.
Yeah.
And we were tasked quite regularly with looking at someone's environment and planning migration to the cloud. Our founder, a chap called Harold, decided that this was an area that could be automated. So started developing a tool to automate the discovery part of that process. Pretty soon after developing that, he realized he could use that tool to run some algorithms to optimize what was going to be deployed.
Yeah.
And suddenly we were into building not just an analytics engine, but also an optimization engine. Now, about 5 years ago, some investors came into the business and said, you've got this amazing tool here, why aren't you taking that out to the market? And then I joined the company, and that's what we've been doing for the past 5 years, is taking Surveil through to the end user via predominantly the Microsoft network.
Thank you. So we're talking now about optimization, and we're talking primarily around Microsoft licensing, and especially around Microsoft Azure, is that correct?
Yeah, so our main areas of focus have always been Microsoft, and we in particular look at Azure in terms of mapping the resources within the Azure environment, but also 365, modern work, and on that side it's more about license optimization, adoption, and security.
Yeah, and it's a really key timing, and I think because everybody over the last 5 years has gone through this, or 10 years now, have gone through this journey of moving up to the cloud, and you went from this documented progression of coming off of the CapEx model and going on to OpEx, and it was always a bit of a shock, especially for early adopters that were going into this consumption model, because in the old days, if you were playing the CapEx model, you always had to look at the hardware that you were buying, and you had to guess how much growth you were going to have in 5 years, and you had to build in that redundancy into the hardware to make sure that actually you weren't going to create bottlenecks in 3 years' time, which normally meant at that point you were spending an awful lot of money in one go on hardware. And that's why the OpEx model became so attractive. But on the other hand, there's this great source of conflict, isn't there? Because Azure billing's not, or Microsoft billing as a whole, can be very complex, and it's hard to actually drill down to what your infrastructure looks like.
Yeah, so you've got the elasticity of cloud was its great original pitch.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
So you don't have, like as you said, you don't have to kind of plan and commit. You can just roll out and it will grow with you. And that was a great promise.
Yeah.
And it is a great promise, you know, and it is a great advantage to have that elasticity. But as with all great powers, there comes great responsibility.
Absolutely,
right?
Great line. Yes.
You know, and you know the other side of that coin is costs just get out of control.
Yes.
And you know, CFOs and FDs are pulling their hair out at their IT departments, but because there's just no control over those spiraling costs.
Yes.
And that's the first problem that when we came to market with the product, that was the first problem that we sought to have a solution for.
Yes, absolutely. So there's a lot to break down there, Stuart. It sounds very interesting. But if I was to try and sort of like peel that back into simple terms, you're looking to optimize what people are currently spending, and that's meaning by looking to reduce waste. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that we can deliver to an end user is that initial optimization program. You know, the thing that used to be delivered still is delivered by SAM services, software asset management.
Yeah.
You know, these guys would roll in every couple of years and deal with the wastage that had crept into the system.
Yeah.
So what we do is we empower end users and their partners to deliver this, you know, perhaps as an ongoing managed service, using the tool, automating the discovery and the recommendations, so that you can then go and deliver on those recommendations, be you the end user or be you the partner.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So it's coming away from that cycle of audit, or almost like an MOT for a car, and bringing it into a consistent service.
Yeah, we talk a lot about getting you on the optimized rails and then staying on those rails.
Yeah.
So we then take, once you've done the optimization program, what we then have the ability to do is both track that you've actually delivered on the savings that you wanted to do. So the tool can be used to track the delivery of those savings.
Yes.
But also then to report on the situation in the cloud if those savings that you've delivered on start to vary back into the bad world of wastage. So we do that in two ways. So you do that by establishing a set of blueprints for the cloud environment to say, these, when I'm deploying resources, deploy to these standards. If those standards are not being deployed against, report it back to me or alert me. Send me an email saying, a server is being spun up here and it's going to be on 24 hours a day when it should be on
9 to 5.
Yeah. So report on those. On top of that, we also have something called anomaly tracking. So basically the things you hadn't thought of, but if something is going on in the cloud that is outside of the norm, we'll report on that.
Yeah.
And again, we can alert on that. And we have had situations where we've alerted on a Friday evening that resources have spun up, in the Azure cloud, which turned out to be a hack, someone spinning up bit mining, coining, that kind of thing. Being able to alert on that, within hours of that being spun up, has saved both the partner and the end user.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Quite a hefty sum.
Well, not only that, but you're using data-led investigation to improve your security posture.
Yes.
So it's not just a financial saving. The financial saving on its own, I can see, will be amazing, especially for the SME business, because I don't think they have that layer of visibility at the moment.
No.
And if they can get back to a stage similar to when we were dealing with CapEx projects, where they can actually budget and forecast over the next year, but then stay within that budget, I think that in itself is going to be incredibly popular. But what you're saying is that we're taking it to the next level, where you can actually use this data-led reporting to act as another layer of security.
Yeah, and security is another area that we've moved into. I mean, we're not a security tool, right? So we wouldn't prevent that bit mining incident.
No, but it's another flag.
Yes, absolutely. We're there to alert on it.
Yeah.
But you also, from the security point of view, there are so many elements within your existing deployment, be that Azure, be that 365. There are so many elements that will have an impact on your security posture.
Yes.
That the great one that always comes to mind, and I actually I was sitting in on this call.
Yes.
Was our initial engagement, we have something called a health check.
Okay.
And that health check doesn't give you all the underlying data to the insights.
Yeah.
but gives you a headline. This is the impact we could have. These are the savings we can find. Here's a snapshot of your environment, and here's a plan for what we could deliver for you in terms of savings. That's the idea behind the health check. And when we engage early with partners, we'll often sit in on the first readbacks of those health checks. So where you've ingested the data and then you're reading that information back to the end user. And I sat in on a call. One of the reports that we have simply shows a map of logins.
Yes.
So it's like a world map, and there's all these little dots of where the logins coming from, and you always get a few which are a bit weird.
Yeah.
You sit in one and you go, well, who's logging in from the Caribbean? And then someone goes, oh, Steve was in Jamaica for his holiday.
Yes.
Blah, 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 that's fine. But on this particular one, we were sitting there and saying, and here's where all your logins. And you could see, it was on a Teams call, but you could see the blood drain from the face of the IT manager and someone said, why have we got logins in Belarusia?
Ooh, yeah, absolutely.
And it was like, okay, and we literally, the IT manager said, we're going to have to stop the call. I need to go and deal with that now.
Yeah.
So, a fun example of that immediate insight. But things like, is your data categorized in SharePoint? How much uncategorized data is there in SharePoint or OneDrive?
Yes.
Because that's a vulnerability.
Absolutely.
How many global admins do you have?
Yeah.
You'd be amazed how many administrators are on a system.
Oh, absolutely, and really people that should know as well, and they tag it on and become a daily driver.
Yeah.
Which is deadly,
Yeah.
and it's shining a light. So it's more. There's the security side of it. There's the finance side of it. But actually, what we're talking about here is governance, I think.
Yes, it moves into governance.
Yeah.
As I say, once you've done that initial piece of work, which is often financially driven.
Yes.
It's then about maintaining that governance. We talk about the kind of three layers. The inform, optimize, and operate, which we steal from the FinOps.
Yes.
Methodology. But it's true. It's a true methodology. The inform piece is understand what you've got.
Yeah.
The optimized piece is, make it as efficient as possible, both financially and operationally. Am I using the right resources for the right things? But then you have the operate phase, and that is keeping that as our solid state of being within the cloud.
Absolutely.
And that's the bit where, as I say, by having the reports, by having the alerts, and all our data is a maximum of 24 hours old. We're not real time.
No.
But we extract from our API feeds on a 24-hour basis. So when you're looking at your Azure bill, it's the oldest that's going to be is 24 hours old. And when you're looking at these violations is a strong word, but where you're seeing someone has deviated from a path, the most damage that could be done is in that 24-hour period.
For sure. But then if it's not caught in time, and if it happens, on the day after you've just paid for your Azure subscription and you don't notice it until your next Azure cost.
Yeah, exactly.
And in these times where cost of living is a thing, we're seeing slow growth in the economy, any sort of like savings can be the difference between a business staying afloat and being profitable or unfortunately, having to close their doors. So it's very timely. And I think it's really important, what you touched on there, is that previously, yes, this may have been available in the enterprise or the FinOps world, but this is bringing it down and making it available and achievable to the next level down of business, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's where we see companies like ERGOS really being able to help us democratize this kind of FinOps approach.
Yes.
Because it's all well and good for the big boys to be able to make these savings by investing in tooling and all that kind of stuff. But the way for, the majority of businesses in the UK
Are SME,
are
yeah.
SME. Why shouldn't they have the advantage of doing that? Yes, the savings are smaller, but I would argue actually the savings are more important.
More valuable. Yeah, absolutely.
Because, like you said, they can fund an extra head.
Yeah.
They can help you convert what wastage we find into value.
Yes.
And we often see that with IT directors where we free up funds for them to go and then deploy the project that they've always wanted to deploy. And a lot of times now that's AI, right? They want to be able to deploy some sort of AI function within the business, but they haven't got the budget to do it.
Yeah. And a lot of times within organisations, IT and especially infrastructure costs can be seen as a business-wide cost.
Yeah.
But not all of those departments are equal. So if you can actually start to break this down and show what resources, and maybe use some tagging to show that actually this part of the infrastructure is being used by the HR team. This part of the infrastructure is being used by sales and marketing.
Absolutely.
That's going to help the finance team charge back those resources, I presume.
Yeah, and this is a core principle again of the FinOps approach, is to be able to segment your data. And as you say, and we do this through something called smart tagging, which we deploy automatically. When you put the tool in place, it will give you a first pass. We do a kind of AI-driven guess of the smart tags within that. And the reality is if you've built your AD tagging properly,
yes,
you wouldn't need our smart tagging.
No.
In 7 or 8 years of selling in the Microsoft space, I've never yet found anyone with good AD tagging. It's always done on the fly.
Exactly.
There's usually about 5 different spellings of
the same thing.
Of the same thing. And we can eradicate that within our tool. But remember, our tool's a read-only tool. You can do no harm with Surveil. It's not a two-way street. We ingest information, we then display those reports, but you can't action anything through the tool.
No.
So we can play in that space. It's a safe space. So you build a smart tagging and you build your reports there, and then you action them. So we can tweak those smart tags and get them really accurate in terms of, in the Azure world, you can slice and dice the cost data. You can slice and dice the resourcing by anything you can imagine. As long as we've got an identifier, as long as we work out that the common denominator between these resources, the people who own these resources, there's a common denominator, we can then tag those.
Yeah.
And we see this with, in the old days, you would sell a tool like Surveil to the IT manager.
Yes.
But increasingly, we see our partners selling this tool to the finance team.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because you can do no harm with it.
Yeah.
So they can give it to their finance team and say, go and do some, rummaging, go find something. But B, because it is, it's speaking their language in terms of being able to slice and dice that information and deliver it, allow them to cross-charge.
Yes.
Allow them to say, right, that department or that marketing campaign, for instance, is costing us these resources. It's costing us these licenses.
Yeah.
And being able to get down to a really granular level in terms of cost, which is, I'm led to believe, what finance people and accountants love to do.
Absolutely, and I think you've touched upon a really important point there. There's this tension always between technical and finance, and a lot of times in smaller businesses it's the same person that has to wear that hat.
Yes.
But if it's 2 people, the technical department will get excited by the proof of concept. They get excited about new technology and they want to play with it and they want it to work. But they don't necessarily go back after it's been proven and adopted by the business to optimize it. And it might be, a case of 20-30% difference in resources, which used to be acceptable in the CapEx world, where you're running that resource too rich. You've got idle capacity.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can put that into language that the finance people understand and can report on, you actually start to dissolve that tension a bit, because then you can actually see, no, those resources are running at the right point for now.
Yeah.
If we bring on 2 more heads, there's going to be a cost that goes ahead to it, but you can start to plan and forecast.
Yes.
And I think from our point of view as an external managed service provider, there's this, when we went to the consumption model, and people, because Azure billing isn't straightforward, you never really can get to the bottom, or you haven't been to it in the past. And if you've got a relationship with a client, sometimes there can be this area of conflict where they think you're overcharging, and us as a provider, we're saying, no, that's actually the usage that we've got. But trying to drill down into the individual elements hasn't been straightforward, even for us as a provider.
Yeah.
Or even when you do get down to the individual elements of all of these charges, trying to put that into language that an FD can understand, it feels like you're trying to blind them with science. And that's not the intention. We want good and healthy relationships. And I think this is a powerful tool to do that.
Yeah, I think that, so again, my experience is, and so what I should say is we spent a lot of time understanding how to report on Azure billing. It's a key deliverable. When we show our tool to end users, it's probably the first or second screen that we'll show them is the Azure bill summary, what you see when you look at that is essentially a heat map. It's a big table of numbers, but they're all coloured based on who's burning through, what's burning the hottest. So the brighter the red, the more spend that is burnt through. And again, you can slice and dice that information by department, by country, by job function, but and the table changes and the heat map changes. So finance people can see in as simple a way as we can display what is a lot of data, can get to that information really quickly. Now, what I've seen is when we've got to that screen number 1, number 2, I've sat in calls where Bernard, I think you know Bernard.
Yeah, I do. Yes.
Kind of presents that screen, and the FD just goes, you know what, I've seen enough.
Yeah.
Because they're the people that have sat down and scratched their head looking at their Azure billing.
Yes.
And they see this, they see it all laid out in front of them in a language they understand, in a table, in a heat map.
Yes.
And they can see where the problems are. The FD's not going to sort those problems. He's going to say to the IT manager, why is this costing us so much?
Exactly.
And the other thing to point out is, for about the last 2 years, we've been embedding, the large language model into the tool. So they don't even have to look at that map.
No.
What they can do is just open up the chatbot and say, what are my top 5 resources burning today?
Yeah.
And then ping that over to the IT manager and say, is this okay? Should we be looking at this?
Yeah.
So, we really do try and keep that, as simplified as possible for people to get the most value quickly out of the insight.
And I think that's really important. And I think ERGOS, all of our clients have a dedicated account manager, and we undertake a minimum a quarterly business review, but in some cases it's a monthly account management meeting. And I think having this tool with our account managers' disposal to go and actually have the conversations with the key contacts at these clients is so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about proving your value to your customer,
Yeah.
to be able, if you're opening up that reporting to your account team, your account team can pick up the phone to that IT manager to say, oh, you've got this resource here burning quite hot. Do you want to have a look at that? That is in and of itself is an amazing thing to be able to do.
Well, absolutely, and I think if you were to take that one step further, and I'm not sure I've actually taken it this far, but if you were to look at maybe some business premium licenses or Office 365 licenses, is there a way we can actually look at some of the functionality within Microsoft that they may already have licenses for that aren't using?
Yeah, I mean, one of the core optimization algorithms within the 365 reporting is to look for that redundancy, so we don't just look at the license build, we look at the usage. So you can report on people who have an E5 license and there's some element of that E5 license that they're not using.
Yes.
That they haven't used, that I can't think of one off the top of my head, but that they haven't used a particular
service within that license.
So, and the tool is smart enough to say, actually, our recommendation here is that this person should go down to an E3, and maybe you could, maybe it's better if there's an add-on to add to that. So it will give those kind of recommendations. But
you're also driving awareness and adoption.
Yes.
So through those quarterly business reviews, it's a way for the account managers to have a conversation with the key contacts to say, do you know your existing licensing can do this? And we've seen through the reporting that you're not. Is this something that's of interest to you?
Yeah.
Which is just showing value.
Yes, and you can look at that at the higher level as well. So you can look across an organisation and say, how many documents did we share externally?
Yeah.
Are we using OneDrive?
Yeah.
Are we using SharePoint effectively? So again, from an adoption perspective, this is this is the value that our customers tend to grow into.
Yes.
So you have the optimization piece at the front end, but then then there's that adoption piece, even down to teams.
Yeah.
So if you imagine, we can report on who's talking to who within your organization.
Yes.
We have they're kind of odd looking at first, but you see all these lines sort of saying about which departments are talking to which department.
Yes. So the analytics piece.
Yeah. So you can see who's affected. You can see which departments are effectively communicating with the tools.
Yeah.
And if you've got if you have a little island of a department that isn't communicating with anyone, well, do they need a full Teams license then?
Yeah.
If they're not using it, do we want to talk to them about being more collaborative because they've got the tools to do it? You can come at that from both sides, but you have the insight to be able to go and have those conversations.
Absolutely. And I think everybody at the moment is talking about AI. It's the massive buzzword around. Have you seen instances where people are using these savings and optimizations to drive more investment towards Copilot or AI?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously Copilot was a big thing, when it came out. A lot of people, bought trial licenses and sort of gave it a go. And, like all of us, we were kind of like, I don't know what this can do for me.
Yeah.
We built a whole Copilot reporting tool in the modern work piece. And the important bit, the feedback we got from the end users was the important bit that gave us and gave them is because we were plugging into the usage data as well as the licensing data, and at first we had to use kind of Microsoft's recommendations, but as we gain more information, we can obviously start building our own kind of algorithms for this. But what what we were able to deliver back to customers, which they found really important, was to be able to give them a likelihood score for all their users. So we can say, based on your users' usage of their other Microsoft tools, this particular person is highly likely to get benefit from Copilot. This kind of person is less likely to get benefit from Copilot. So once they'd done their trial licenses, they then had at least an idea of a plan about how to roll it out effectively.
Yeah.
To be able to roll out to these people. And then on top of that, you then track the real-time usage.
Yes.
So you could say, right, we thought these bunch of people were going to get a lot of benefit. Looks like they're not really using it. Or looks like this individual isn't really using it. They don't really need that full license. Let's move it across to the next person on the list. So being able to be, scientific, for want of a better phrase, with that adoption, with that rollout.
It's data-led again, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's making it's giving you a frame of reference to make a decision. Yeah. Whereas before it could have been scattergun.
And the other thing about AI, so we've recently added what we call AI Manager, because we were reporting on licensing and usage, and now we're reporting on the resources. So increasingly, you're seeing Copilot and Claude, morphing into the building of agents within an organization, and agents consume. And so what we're now reporting on is the consumption that those agents and those AI requests is using within your environment, because we're a year, 18 months, 2 years maybe into this, and you are starting to see the bill shocks happen.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Where people are saying, why am I paying for this much? And it's because of this. It's because an agent can spin up resources in Azure. An agent will be using tokens.
Yeah.
There's this new phrase that everyone's got, new function that everyone's got to get their head around, is this token spend.
Yeah.
So we're reporting on that now.
Yeah.
And I posted on LinkedIn yesterday this finding that and I love this, right? If you go into Claude or you go into Copilot, there's some prompts that you can kind of download, and I'm going to put the Reddit feed in my LinkedIn post, that can convert your LLM to deliver to you in something called Caveman mode.
Oh, okay.
And what Caveman mode does is it takes out all that, it takes out the warm, fluffy responses you get from Copilot or Claude, where it goes, oh, that's a great idea. How about with this? And the fact that it always asks you a question afterwards to keep you doom scrolling through the thing. It takes all that out and it just gives you very straight answers. It's called Caveman mode because it literally says, it replies to you like a caveman.
Yes.
It's kind of like here document sort of thing. Now, what we found through tracking, through tracking the resources and tracking the tokens, and this started as a prank.
Yeah.
Right? This started as people saying, "Oh, wouldn't it be funny to get my Claude to talk to me like a caveman?" But what's now transpired over the past couple of months is what you see in the resources is where people are deploying caveman mode. You're seeing up to an 85% reduction in their resource costs.
That's significant.
Because it's not spending time in the data center, fluffing up its responses.
Yeah.
That's a significant saving.
Oh, right. Yeah, it really is.
So, it's being, again, we could only kind of validate that finding because we were giving customers the ability to track the true cost of that AI deployment.
That's really interesting. And I guess my final piece from here is that Microsoft as an entity, they're always evolving, always moving on. And we find as a Microsoft partner that the landscape's always changing and we're always needing to keep up. And I think there's been some fairly substantial changes around the enterprise agreements and the way that you used to become a direct customer with Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wondered from your viewpoint, are there many changes now? Are more people coming towards the CSP model?
Well, they're kind of being pushed that way. You know, at the low end enterprise agreement level, you know, that Microsoft is dissolving that.
Right.
You know, you are seeing customers, you know, at the kind of 500 user level, coming to renewal and being told, sorry, but you can't renew.
Right. Okay.
They're
being that brutal with it.
And being pushed towards CSP. Now, you know, if you really want to, but you're paid through the nose now. There's no discounts available at the kind of what used to be the kind of bottom two layers of enterprise. So you know, there is definitely a migration of those customers, and they are, you know, they have a particular set of needs.
Yeah.
You know, they're used to some support. They're used to being able to kind of map and you know, plan on their costs. That's why they were an enterprise agreement customer. So we built you know, we built a set of reports we call Contract Manager, specifically to allow you to, again, ingest the reality, understand what's going on in your existing space, and then map it against what if we moved this to CSP? What tweaks would we need to make? What changes would we need to make? And what would be the financial impact of that? And you can do that on the fly. You know, and your account manager can help you do that with the tool, so that you can map out and say, I remember from my days selling licensing, where, you know, if you were looking at those kind of tweaks, what if we changed this license to this license? That was always something you had to go away and manipulate a spreadsheet, come back a couple of days later with the answer.
And it wasn't straightforward.
It was never straightforward.
No.
So to be able to do that on the fly and be able to react to that very quickly. But the other thing I'd say about that motion into CSP is what we hope Surveil delivers is the ability for, you know, companies like ERGOS to be able to automate and wrap the kind of services that those customers are used to.
Yes.
So that partners like yourself can deliver that same level of service back to them without having to hire 10 people to do it.
Absolutely, and that's the efficiencies and using the automation to help. And I think if we are talking to any enterprise agreement customers out there, that's a journey that we'd very much like to talk to you about and to go through. Stuart, it's been fascinating. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like to mention?
Well, I'm sure we haven't got enough tape, because I could talk about this for days. But no, I think, you know, we've touched on a lot of the points there. Like you said, the main thing is that in the Microsoft world, the only thing that's certain is change. And you know, what we hope to do is to be able to give both the end user and the partners supporting those end users the tools to be able to navigate that change.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been fascinating to talk to you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.